You have lived with a heart so open it could hold the oceans. You've given love freely, unconditionally, without measure, and yet, time and time again, you've been met with emptiness. You have felt the sting of betrayal, the silent disregard of your efforts, the weight of hearts that could not receive the depth of your devotion. And now, perhaps, you feel yourself retreating. Perhaps the empath within you is learning to step back, to guard what has always been sacred, what has always been pure. Understand this. There is no shame in pulling away. There is no weakness in choosing yourself over perpetual heartbreak. Every time you feel the urge to hide, know that it is not bitterness guiding you. It is wisdom. It is divine. It is the universe whispering that your energy, your light, is too precious to be squandered on those who cannot honor it. You see, being avoidant after endless hurt is not a curse. It is a transformation. It is your soul reclaiming its sovereignty. You are no longer the well that never stops giving. You are now the river that knows when to flow and when to rest, the flame that refuses to be snuffed by careless hands. There is power in withdrawal. There is clarity in detachment. When you step back, you see the world for what it truly is. You learn that not all who seek your heart are worthy of its treasures, and that love in its highest form must begin with yourself. And yes, there will be those who misinterpret your boundaries as coldness. Let them. Their understanding is not your responsibility. Your duty is to yourself, your peace, your growth, your divine calling. Remember this, empathy without wisdom becomes vulnerability. Compassion without self-respect becomes suffering. And those who do not understand your retreat are often the same ones who benefited from your limitless giving. But now the rules have changed. Your heart has learned the sacred art of reciprocity. What you give must be met with honor, or it will be withdrawn. So rise, not in anger, but in sovereignty. Protect your spirit, cherish your heart, and never apologize for knowing your worth. Becoming avoidant is not the end of love. It is the evolution of it. It is a sacred alignment with your own well-being, a divine recalibration of energy, a lesson for yourself and for the world. The empath is no longer a river to be drained, but a force of nature to be revered. And in this shift, you will find the greatest truth. When you choose yourself, the universe conspires to protect you. When you respect your soul, life respects it in return. When you withdraw from toxicity, you make space for purity. And one day, the right hearts will meet you not in need, but in honor, not in demand, but in resonance. The empather who becomes avoidant is not lost. They are awakened. They are whole. They are finally free. An empath is not just someone who cares. It is someone whose soul is attuned to the invisible currents of emotion that surround them. They do not merely observe the world. They feel it, absorb it, internalize it. Every glance, every word, every subtle shift in energy resonates within them, often long after the moment has passed. To be an empath is to carry a unique kind of sensitivity, a depth of perception that goes beyond what the eye can see or the mind can understand. It is a gift, a blessing, and a challenge all at once. For to feel so intensely is to be constantly aware of the subtleties of human suffering and joy alike. Empaths are often drawn to people in ways that defy logic. They instinctively understand the unspoken pain in someone's gaze, the hidden struggle behind a forced smile, the energy of someone's heart, even when their words tell a different story. This innate attunement allows them to offer compassion without being asked, to comfort without judgment, and to love without expectation. But it also means that their own emotions are constantly under siege, as they absorb not only what is theirs, but what belongs to others. The line between their own feelings and the feelings of those around them becomes blurred, and often they carry burdens that were never theirs to bear. The empath's strength lies in their openness, the willingness to connect, to understand, to offer their heart even when it may be ignored or misunderstood. But this very openness can make them vulnerable. They are magnets for those who seek validation, energy, or emotional labor without reciprocity. In their desire to heal, to nurture, and to support, They sometimes forget the necessity of protecting their own energy. The empath's nature is so generous, so willing to forgive and to love unconditionally, that it can be exploited by those who lack the same depth of feeling. Being an empath is also a journey of profound awareness. They sense the ripple effects of every interaction, recognizing the subtle shifts in mood, the hidden tensions, and the unspoken truths. Their intuition is a guiding force, leading them toward people and experiences that resonate on a soul level and away from those that do not. Yet, despite this innate wisdom, they often give too much too soon, driven by a deep desire to make a difference, to alleviate suffering, to connect fully and meaningfully. This combination of insight and vulnerability makes the empath a paradoxical figure, powerful in perception, yet tender in heart, capable of immense love, yet susceptible to pain. An empath's nature also encompasses a deep sense of responsibility. They feel compelled to ease the suffering they perceive, often at the expense of their own needs. Their lives are intertwined with the lives of others in ways that ordinary perception cannot comprehend. They understand the world as a web of interconnected energy, where every thought, word, and emotion carries weight and consequence. This profound sensitivity makes them attuned to both the beauty and the darkness in human experience, and their hearts are shaped by this constant awareness. Yet beneath this extraordinary capacity lies a subtle danger, the risk of losing oneself. In their desire to be present for others, empaths can neglect their own boundaries, their own healing, and their own growth. Without conscious awareness, the empath can become a vessel of other people's pain, forgetting that their own spirit requires care, rest, and protection. Their gift, if unchecked, can become a burden, and their generosity can become a burden, and their generosity can become self-sacrifice. Ultimately, the nature of an empath is a delicate balance between giving and preserving, between feeling and discerning. It is a calling to experience life in its fullest depth, to love without condition, and to navigate a world that does not always understand the power of sensitivity. To be an empath is to live with a heart open to the world, yet vulnerable to its storms. To bear the unseen weight of emotions while striving to maintain one's own center, and to transform sensitivity into wisdom that shapes not only the self, but the lives of all they touch. Hurt is not always immediate or obvious. Sometimes it arrives in whispers, in small betrayals, in words left unspoken or promises left broken. For an empath who feels so deeply and perceives the subtleties of every interaction, these small wounds accumulate like drops of rain on a fragile roof. At first, each hurt may seem insignificant, a momentary sting, a fleeting disappointment. But over time, they build, layer upon layer, until the heart is weighed down by a heaviness it cannot ignore. The cumulative effect of hurt is not simply a series of isolated incidents. It is a transformation of the soul, a gradual reshaping of trust, expectation, and the willingness to give without restraint. Every empath knows this experience intimately. Every time they open their heart and are met with indifference, dishonesty, or neglect, a small fracture forms. These fractures may not be visible to others, but within the empath, they are profound. The empath absorbs the pain of others, but when their own heart is repeatedly wounded, it is not merely the external acts of harm that hurt. It is the way these experiences erode the foundation of their belief in human goodness. They begin to question whether their generosity will ever be honored, whether their love will ever be received with the respect it deserves, whether their heart can remain open without being taken for granted. The cumulative effect of hurt changes the empath in ways that are subtle yet undeniable. It alters how they perceive relationships, how they set boundaries, and how they engage with the world around them. Where once they might have approached life with trust and hope, now there is caution, a careful weighing of intentions before giving themselves fully. Every past betrayal becomes a teacher, every slight a warning, and every disappointment a reminder that the heart must protect itself if it is to endure. This is not cynicism. It is wisdom earned through experience. Repeated hurt also tests the empath's ability to maintain their compassion. They may find themselves asking, if I continue to give in the same way, will I only continue to be hurt? The heart, which flowed freely like a river into every life it touched, begins to build levees and dams, not out of malice, but out of necessity. This is the body's and the soul's way of saying, enough. I cannot continue to pour from a vessel that has been emptied without care. For empaths, this realization can be painful in itself. For empathy is their nature, and withdrawal feels like denying a part of themselves. Yet it is also a vital act of self-preservation, a recognition that healing and balance cannot coexist with relentless giving without reciprocity. There is also a spiritual dimension to this cumulative hurt. The empath's experiences of pain are not wasted. They are lessons, catalysts for growth, and opportunities for deep self-understanding. Each heartbreak, each betrayal, each moment of unreciprocated love teaches the empath about boundaries, discernment, and the sacredness of their own energy. They learn to distinguish between those who seek connection and those who seek exploitation, between those who can honor their heart and those who cannot. Over time, hurt ceases to be purely destructive and begins to serve as a mirror, reflecting the areas in which self-respect, wisdom, and divine alignment are needed. Yet the cumulative effect of hurt is also a turning point. There comes a moment when the empath's heart, exhausted from repeated exposure to harm, chooses self-preservation over sacrifice. It is a subtle shift, a quiet declaration that love without reciprocity is no longer sustainable. This is the threshold where empathy transforms from boundless giving into discerned compassion, where vulnerability is balanced with vigilance, and where the heart learns that self-care is not selfish, it is necessary. Through this accumulation of experiences, the empath emerges wiser, stronger, and more aligned with the principles of balance and sacred self-worth. Hurt, though painful, becomes the sculptor of their inner strength, shaping their capacity to love not blindly, but consciously, not recklessly, but wisely, and not endlessly, but in alignment with the respect they deserve. The empath begins life with a heart wide open, ready to receive and to give, ready to trust and to believe in the goodness of others. This openness is their gift, their signature way of moving through the world, a heart that radiates warmth, a soul attuned to every nuance of human emotion, a spirit willing to absorb the joys and the sorrows of those around them. But openness, no matter how noble, carries its risks. When this generous heart is met repeatedly with disregard, betrayal, or insensitivity, the empath begins to recognize that their openness is both a blessing and a vulnerability. There comes a moment when the heart whispers softly but insistently, "I must protect myself if I am to survive." And so begins the gradual shift from openness to guardedness. This transition is not sudden, nor is it born of malice. It is not a rejection of the world, but rather a conscious preservation of the self. The empath begins to observe more, to listen more carefully, and to discern the energy of those around them before offering the full measure of their heart. They no longer pour into every interaction without reflection. Instead, they pause, they measure, they weigh the intentions of others against the lessons of past hurt. Each prior experience becomes a guide, informing the way they now navigate relationships, signaling which connections are safe and which are potentially draining. Guardedness emerges not as coldness, but as wisdom in action. It is the empath's way of saying, "I am still compassionate, still capable of love, but I will no longer sacrifice my well-being for those who cannot honor it." In this shift, there is an elegance, a quiet strength, and a say. Left respect that was often absent in the unguarded days. The empath becomes selective, discerning not only who they let into their emotional world, but also how deeply and how quickly they allow themselves to be involved. Boundaries are no longer abstract concepts. They are living, breathing structures that protect the soul while still allowing for meaningful connection. At first, this guardedness can feel uncomfortable, even alien to the empath's nature. The heart that once flowed freely may resist the idea of withholding, of stepping back, of saying no when every fiber of their being wants to say yes. Yet, over time, the empath learns that this shift is not a betrayal of their essence. It is a necessary evolution. Without it, they risk depletion, resentment, and even bitterness. Guardedness, when embraced with consciousness, is a form of self-love, a sacred practice of honoring one's own emotional and spiritual boundaries while still remaining capable of authentic connection. This evolution also teaches the empath patience. They begin to recognize that not all love is immediate, not all connection is safe, and not all energy is meant for consumption. By tempering openness with discernment, the empath gains clarity and avoids unnecessary entanglements that drain rather than uplift. They learn that to be fully present with the right people, they must first preserve their own energy and protect their heart from those who would take it for granted. This shift does not diminish their capacity for empathy. It refines it, making it more intentional, more focused, and ultimately more powerful. Guardedness also fosters resilience. It allows the empath to navigate the world without losing themselves to the chaos of other people's emotions. The shift from openness to guardedness is a lesson in balance. The balance between giving and receiving, between trust and caution, between love and protection. It is a spiritual recalibration, an acknowledgement that while empathy is a divine gift, discernment is a necessary companion. In essence, this shift marks a turning point in the empath's journey. The heart that once offered indiscriminately now offers consciously. The soul that once absorbed everything now chooses carefully what to carry. The empath becomes not just a vessel for others' emotions, but a steward of their own energy, a guardian of their own inner peace. And in this evolution, they discover that true strength does not lie in endless giving. It lies in the wisdom today, our when to give, to whom, and in what measure. Boundaries are often misunderstood, especially by those who have lived in the endless giving of empathy. To an empath, the concept of boundaries can feel foreign at first, almost contradictory to the nature of their heart. They are used to feeling deeply, to absorbing emotions, to giving without hesitation, and to loving without reservation. And yet, there comes a point in their journey where the absence of boundaries is no longer sustainable. Repeated exposure to exploitation, emotional depletion, or unreciprocated care becomes a teacher, guiding them toward the realization that boundaries are not walls to keep others out. They are lines drawn in protection of their own sacred space, a declaration of self-respect and self-preservation. Recognizing boundaries begins with self-awareness. The empath must first learn to identify their own needs, their limits, and their emotional thresholds. This is not always easy, because empaths are naturally attuned to the needs of others, often at the expense of their own. For years, they may have ignored the subtle warning signs, the rising tension in their chest, the exhaustion in their spirit, the quiet resentment in their thoughts, because they prioritized caring for everyone else. Boundaries require the courage to acknowledge these internal signals, to listen to the whisper of the soul that says, I am worthy of protection. I am worthy of space. Setting boundaries also involves discernment. It is not merely about saying no. It is about understanding where their energy is best invested and recognizing relationships that nourish versus relationships that drain. For an empath, this discernment is a form of wisdom. It is the acknowledgement that love, when given without discernment, can be misdirected, and that compassion without limits can become self-destructive. By establishing boundary, the empath preserves the integrity of their heart while maintaining the ability to engage with the world authentically. Boundaries are deeply empowering. They are not restrictions on life. They are safeguards for the soul. When an empath says no, they are not rejecting the world. They are affirming their own value. When they withdraw temporarily from a draining situation, they are not abandoning others. They are prioritizing healing. This recognition of boundaries transforms the empath from a passive recipient of emotional chaos into an active guardian of their inner landscape. They learn that the quality of their connections depends on the respect given to their limits, and that relationships thrive when both parties honor one another's space and energy. Moreover, boundaries teach the empath about reciprocity. Lifelike energy is a system of give and take, and empaths begin to see that their endless giving is only sustainable when it is met with respect, care, and consideration. They learn that it is not selfish to protect their heart, it is necessary. Each boundary drawn is a sacred act of alignment with their own well-being and a declaration that they will no longer tolerate depletion in the guise of connection. This is a radical and transformative realization because it shifts the empath from endless sacrifice to conscious participation in relationships, from constant absorption to intentional presence, and from unconscious giving to mindful generosity. Boundaries also have a spiritual dimension. They honor the empath's divine capacity to love while acknowledging the sanctity of their energy. They allow the empath to engage with the world from a place of fullness rather than emptiness, to offer compassion without losing themselves, and to transform empathy from a burden into a force for healing and transformation. In recognizing boundaries, the empath is At closing off, they are opening themselves to a higher form of connection, one built on respect, clarity, and mutual alignment. Ultimately, the recognition of boundaries is a declaration of self-sovereignty. It is the empath's way of saying, I honor my heart, I honor my spirit, I honor my worth. It is the turning point where sensitivity meets strength, where compassion meets discernment, and where the journey of the empath transforms from endless giving to empowered conscious love. Through boundaries, the empath learns that protecting themselves is not a denial of empathy. It is the highest expression of it. When an empath reaches the point of avoidance, it is often misunderstood by those around them. To the outside world, withdrawal can appear cold, indifferent, or even unfeeling. People see the absence of immediate availability, the retreat from constant giving, and the selective engagement with relationships, and they may misinterpret it as rejection or hostility. They do not see the layers of thought, the countless moments of internal struggle, and the weight of repeated disappointments that have led to this shift. Avoidance, for an empath, is not a turning away from life or from love. It is a protective mechanism, a conscious response to repeated exposure to emotional strain, and a profound act of self-preservation. Empaths are designed to feel, to absorb, and to give. For years, their openness allows others to pour their burdens into the empath's heart, sometimes without acknowledgement or gratitude. Over time, the empath learns that giving without boundaries is unsustainable. The world, as beautiful as it is, contains people who cannot honor the depth of their heart, who take without giving, and who exploit the very sensitivity that makes empaths extraordinary. Avoidance emerges not as a failure of empathy, but as a recognition of this reality. It is the empath way of saying silently yet firmly, I will no longer compromise my peace for those who cannot honor it. This is why avoidance is often misread. People see the lack of constant availability and assume that the empath no longer cares. They mistake discernment for disinterest, reflection for rejection. Yet what they fail to understand is that avoidance is a conscious recalibration of energy. It is a boundary in action. It is the empath's recognition that self-preservation is not only necessary, but sacred. When the empath withdraws, they are not closing their heart to the world. They are protecting it, ensuring that when they do engage, it is from a place of fullness, not depletion. Avoidance also serves as a spiritual lesson, both for the empath and for those around them. It teaches the necessity of respect, reciprocity, and awareness of the energy we place into others. When an empath pulls back, it is often a mirror reflecting the imbalance in the relationship, showing the other party the cost of neglect, insensitivity, or emotional exploitation. In this way, avoidance becomes a tool for realignment, a quiet, powerful way to assert that love must be mutual, care must be honored, and energy must be exchanged consciously. The empath who becomes avoidant does so not out of spite, anger, or revenge, but out of a deep recognition of their own value. They understand that their energy is sacred, and that unlimited giving to those who cannot appreciate it diminishes their spirit. Avoidance allows them to preserve the integrity of their heart, to rebuild, to heal, and to cultivate relationships that are aligned with their true essence. It is not a denial of connection, it is a preparation for more meaningful, intentional connection. This shift can be difficult for others to accept. Those accustomed to the empath's previous availability may feel hurt, rejected, or confused. Yet these reactions often stem from a lack of understanding, not from a failing on the part of the empath. Avoidance is not a reflection of indifference. It is a reflection of wisdom. It is the empath's acknowledgement that love without boundaries invites pain, and that sometimes stepping back is the most loving act they can offer themselves. Ultimately, the misunderstanding of avoidance highlights the depth of the empath's journey. Their withdrawal is a sign of growth, discernment, and self-respect. It is a declaration that their energy, their heart, and their soul are not to be taken lightly. While the world may misinterpret it as coldness, the empath knows the truth. Avoidance is an act of divine self-alignment, a sacred protection of their most valuable resource, and a necessary evolution on the path toward conscious, balanced. Healing through detachment is one of the most profound lessons an empath can learn, though it often comes through pain and repeated heartbreak. For the empath, detachment is not the absence of feeling, nor is it the denial of love. It is a conscious choice to step back from relationships, situations, or energies that no longer serve their growth or well-being. It is the realization that while empathy allows them to connect deeply with others, it does not obligate them to sacrifice their own peace. Detachment is the act of reclaiming their energy, of restoring balance to their emotional landscape, and of honoring the sanctity of their own heart. This form of healing is both gentle and powerful. It begins with awareness. The empath recognizes that absorbing another person's pain endlessly or giving without reciprocity leads not to transformation but to exhaustion. They begin to see that attachment to outcomes, to expectations, and to people who cannot meet them halfway creates unnecessary suffering. Detachment is the step where the empath shifts from reactive giving to intentional engagement, understanding that love that drains is not true. Love and care that depletes is not sustainable. Detachment teaches the empathite to prioritize themselves without guilt. In the past, their natural instinct may have been to carry the burdens of others, to intervene in struggles that were not theirs, and to give endlessly in the hope of being needed, appreciated, or loved in return. Over time, however, they learn that their spirit cannot thrive under continuous depletion. By letting go of attachments that create imbalance, whether to people, outcomes, or expectations, they create space for restoration, for clarity, and for the kind of love that nurtures rather than diminishes. This process is deeply transformative. It allows the empath to reclaim their autonomy, to regain the emotional sovereignty that is often eroded by constant overgiving. Detachment is a form of self-respect, a recognition that while they can still feel, still care, and still love, they are no longer obligated to suffer in the pursuit of others' validation. It is a reminder that the most sacred relationship an empath can cultivate is the one with themselves, and that personal boundaries are a form of divine wisdom. Detachment also provides clarity. The empath begins to see the patterns in their relationships, the repeated cycles of depletion, the energy leaks, and the lack of reciprocity. They begin to understand which connections are aligned with their growth and which are toxic or draining. This clarity is liberating because it allows them to make conscious choices about where to invest their heart and where to withdraw. It transforms empathy from blind giving into mindful love, from unconscious absorption into conscious engagement, and from vulnerability that hurts into compassion that heals. Moreover, detachment opens the door to deeper spiritual alignment. By stepping back, the empath learns to trust in the natural flow of life rather than try, to control it through over-involvement. They begin to recognize that love, when forced or unreciprocated, creates suffering, but love that is balanced, mutual, and respectful fosters growth. In this way, detachment becomes not just a protective mechanism, but a sacred practice, an acknowledgement that the empath's energy is precious, their heart is divine, and their emotional well-being is a priority. Through detachment, the empath begins to heal, not by shutting down completely, but by creating space for regeneration. They learn to listen to their own needs, to honor their own limits, and to cultivate a sense of inner peace that no external circumstance can disturb. They understand that stepping back is not abandonment, but preservation, not rejection, but alignment, not coldness, but a profound act of self-love. In the end, healing through detachment teaches the empath that the deepest love they can offer is first directed inward. It is the recognition that when they care for themselves fully, when they honor their own heart, and when they maintain their own energy, they become capable of giving not from depletion, but from abundance. Detachment transforms pain into wisdom, boundaries into freedom, and sensitivity into a source of divine strength. The divine principle of reciprocity is one of the most profound truths an empath must come to understand, though it often reveals itself through experience rather than instruction. For the empath, life is a constant exchange of energy, emotional, spiritual, and mental. Every act of giving, every expression of care, every moment of empathy carries an unseen weight and an unseen expectation, whether conscious or unconscious. Reciprocity is not about demanding repayment or counting every act of kindness. It is about alignment. It is the recognition that the energy one pours into the world must be honored and met with a measure of respect, consideration, and acknowledgement in order to maintain balance and harmony. Empaths often struggle with this principle because their hearts are naturally inclined to give without expectation. They are wired to absorb suffering, to offer comfort, and to provide support without calculating whether it will be returned. Yet through repeated experiences of unreciprocated energy, they learn that giving without balance can lead to depletion, resentment, and even self-neglect. The divine principle of reciprocity teaches that life mirrors what is offered. When empathy is met with disregard, exploitation, or emotional indifference, it signals that the flow of energy is misaligned. Withdrawal or avoidance in response is not a punitive act. It is a realignment of the natural order, a recalibration of balance, and a sacred way to honor one's own worth. This principle operates on both the spiritual and practical levels. Spiritually, it reflects a universal truth. What we send into the world returns to us in some form, whether positive or negative. Emotional energy is no exception. The empath who constantly overgives without regard for boundaries disrupts this flow, leaving themselves vulnerable to imbalance. Through understanding reciprocity, the empath aims to recognize that their sensitivity is not a license for exploitation, but a sacred gift that must be preserved and protected. Practically, reciprocity teaches discernment. It becomes a compass for relationships, a tool for understanding which connections are healthy, supportive, and mutually enriching, and which ones are draining, disrespectful, or one-sided. Reciprocity also emphasizes the sacred responsibility of energy management. The empath learns that their love, attention, and care are not infinite resources to be expended indiscriminately. Instead, they are treasures, and how they are shared matters. By observing the flow of reciprocity, the empath understands which relationships honor their contributions and which do not. This understanding fosters confidence in setting boundaries, withdrawing when necessary, and consciously choosing where to invest their heart. The act of stepping back from unbalanced relationships is not rejection. It is a divinely guided alignment with the natural laws of energy exchange. Furthermore, the principle of reciprocity encourages the empath to cultivate relationships built on mutual respect and honor. It teaches that love and care are most powerful when they are exchanged freely, but acknowledged, given but received, expressed but also valued. This principle is a guide for personal evolution, reminding the empath that true connection does not come from endless self-sacrifice, but from balanced engagement, conscious giving, and the integrity of shared energy. Ultimately, the divine principle of reciprocity is a lesson in self-worth and empowerment. It communicates that the empath's heart is sacred, their energy is precious, and their emotional labor is not to be taken lightly. When the empath internalizes this principle, They learn to give consciously, to love intentionally, and to engage in relationships that honor the sacred flow of energy. It becomes a protective shield as well as a spiritual compass, guiding them toward connections that are nourishing, supportive, and aligned with their highest good. Through the lens of reciprocity, the empath transforms their sensitivity from vulnerability into wisdom, from endless giving into empowered love, and from open-hearted naivety into conscious discernment. They understand that the universe is balanced, that energy always flows back in kind, and that protecting one's heart is not only necessary but divinely sanctioned. In this understanding, the empath discovers harmony, alignment, and the freedom to love without depletion, fully embracing the sacred rhythm of give and take that governs both the heart and the soul. Thank you for your time and trust. Wishing you clarity, strength, and peace on your journey. Goodbye for now. May your heart stay aligned and your spirit always shine bright.